This is ContactTalkRadio.com. Consciousness in action. And you are taking action into your consciousness by tuning into Contact Talk Radio.
And on TuneIn.com, Ping.fm, and Upsnap Mobile.
Contact Talk Radio.
Welcome to What the Health, an independent approach to your health span. Have you noticed how our healthcare system may not have your best interest in mind? Join Dr. Eckel in this fun and sometimes disturbing exploration of the state of healthcare and what it means for you. Now, here's your host, Dr. Eckel.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. I'm Dr. Greg Eckel, and this is What the Health on the Contact Talk Radio. Today, I have my guest, Tina Nagel, and she is going to be talking. She's a relationship-driven business owner who loves to cause and disrupt current leadership status quo. I like that cause, being in a state of cause. Tina works with individuals, teams, and groups of all sizes to collaborate with the innate state of awareness that she calls being, and that is going to be the topic of our show today. Tina shares proven in-depth expertise in leadership development, organizational design, performance management, training, and communications. As a master certified life coach, a peer human, and a retired corporate leader, Tina brings humor, tenacity, truth, and grace to the world today. Tina, welcome aboard What the Health.
Thank you. What an intro.
Hey, well, what a being you are. So this topic is near and dear. I love this component of moving into a state of being and suffering of burnout, disengagement, poor health, inconsistent performance in life and work. And that topic for our listeners and viewers out there, this is like the thing. So I want you to dissect that for us, and we're going to launch in depth on how to get people into action and into being. So what exactly do you mean by that?
I know it's a mouthful, right? I think that what we're, all of us are experiencing and bearing witness to is this, mode of reaction, right? And very rarely is it an innate tool or, I suppose, action, right? To go within to seek the answers that we desire. We live in a society that is an outward in, right? Mm-hmm. We are within systems, right? That are quite judgy and controlling and shameful and all of those, right? And the answer is truly within. And so what we are experiencing as a collective is this massive shed, this massive growth, and this, dare I say, leveling up of consciousness.
So that is, it is the state of the day, the shame, blame, and guilt culture. Old systems are kind of not going quietly into that dark night. I mean, we see it coming from the president of the United States on, from the podium, calling people out in a state of shame and blame and guilt. It's about as far from a state of being as one could get at the moment. And it seems like we're moving even a little bit further into that dark night of the soul, so to speak. So with this component, what have you found, or how did you get into this concept of, I have said in multiple shows around the state of oneness or unified field component. And it seems like that's what you're proposing here.
Yeah, it absolutely is. It is the collective, right? It is what we are all a part of, right? And then somewhere in the inner translation of it and the experience of expression have really got it twisted a bit, right? Yeah. So what I would offer is that when there is that perhaps feeling of, are we going more into the darkness? Right? That is a pause, right? We're not. We're all, experiencing this together globally as a collective. And at the same time, what from the podium as you offered, right? When there's the, you should, right? And there's this perceived finger pointing. It is about how we all pause and actually take that in and become curious with ourselves. Mm-hmm. And ask like, kind of settle up next to that and be like, what's that about? Right? Like, why are we shooting people? Right? And seek within. And what does that judgment, what does that shame, bubble up for us? Right? And then, almost like remote view it, right? And ask that questions, right? About ourselves and for ourselves. It is not about somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Right. So it's not, it's not this component of a group mind or group think when you're talking about a collective consciousness. It's not the gang mentality of like, well, we're just all running this way. So if you're not running with us, you're against us. But that's kind of the discussion that is occurring now of the vaccinated versus non-vaccinated, or this certain skin color versus that skin color, or this nationality versus that nationality, that whole duality or divide and conquer system that exists, and that is a bunch of propaganda actually to divide and conquer, is the way that it just keeps coming up for me. So when you're saying, okay, well, how does this bubble up if we're going to kind of mosey up to the bar with this, what is coming up? So the apparatus that we're filtering it in. And so like, this is we can get really abstract with it, but in a concrete discussion, then where do you take this? So you're saying moving into a state of being. So what is that? What is a state of being?
Yeah, I think that it absolutely is an individualized experience. Mm-hmm. However, in the realm of concrete, right, we'll say this, that we are in a state of reaction, right? Like, we're in survival mode right now, right? We see that, we know that, because, we're afraid. Mm-hmm. Right? That's what we are seeing at this point. And I am not just referring to vax, non-vax, or what we're seeing in the political arena and the health arena. This goes even further than that, if we can imagine that. So when in the state of being, right, when we are reactionary, we are triggered, right, by a past experience, right? So when we are in reaction mode, and in a state of fear, anxiety, all of that, right, then we are innately in the past, right? And so when we are in the, we'll say, present moment in quotes, and yet we are carrying emotion, carrying experience, and then thus reacting from previous experience, we are actually bypassing that true now moment and creating chaos in the future.
Got it. So we're basically reacting to past kind of our apparatus, is the way that I talk about it, and putting that then into the future and missing any opportunity for some new, like in this moment of time. So in the now, right? I've Ron Doss to thank for Be Here Now. And I found him early in my life, and I'm so grateful for that. And so that component of, the apparatus of how we're each individually experiencing the current moment and what is happening in our worlds. You talk about if you've had trauma in your past, and we look at ADE, which are adverse childhood experiences, ACE, which show in North America, pretty much no one gets out of here without trauma. And so, we have trauma, and then how that adds into that cycle that you're talking about of the reaction to whatever event is happening, which then reflects to our past experiences in our brains to keep us alive. And then we're not even conscious of a response. It's just an autopilot, like stay alive, stay alive, stay alive. Is that a correct assessment of what you just downloaded there?
I absolutely believe it to be a very accurate and, yes, a great representation of what I am saying. And the thing is that, when we are, and we all have trauma, by the way, right? Yeah. Trauma is a deeply, distressing, disturbing experience. And that in itself is differing for each being. right?
Right. Right.
It's the term, right? It's the term. And what we are seeing is that there's these releases and sheddings of the differing traumas. And what I also will offer is that when there is this reaction and there's this unconsciousness of the reaction mode from a previous, experience, emotion, whatnot that we carry forward, it is as though it's on autopilot, as I think you mentioned that,
Yes.
or that just came to me. I think you did though. That the systems that we operate in, school, government, religion, family, right? We almost forget we're free.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, right, we don't check in with ourselves for an answer. And I'll give it in an example. And I'll be a little bit cheeky around this, right?
Okay.
So in I guess the grander, cheeky examples here is if we can feel back through deciding to go to college or not, right? There's this, did you or I know I didn't, right? Check in with myself and say, is that what you want, Tina? Do you want to do that? It's just what we did.
Yeah.
Right. And now that is not the same for everyone. Right. And then yet in that example, if somebody did it, right, then think about how that expectation almost, right, that that system that says that's what you do, and whether you're choosing it, if you've really sat with yourself and checked in with yourself and not, right, then what is that story that's told, that's written, right, whether in your family or in your career life, if you did or didn't go to school, if you operate with your degree or you don't.
Yeah.
Right. And it starts to mold this narrative that really is internal. Right. And I'm going to offer that, it's probably not always, right, our voices, our energies that have written that narrative within. However, it did partner, and we can rewrite it because it's our story.
Yeah, that's the component I don't think that is well understood. So I'll just tell you, my mother ingrained in me to go to college from early on. So I did not. She just said it was a given, like you're just going to do that. So that's number one. So did I check in before? No, but I did make the best of it.
Yes.
And I'm really grateful that she did instill that in me, and that, I'm now on here with What the Health, and I've been in practice of medicine for 21 years and have a lot of freedoms as a result of it. But I totally get it in this example of the kind of the unconscious thinking. So we don't really get taught growing up in grade school and elementary and high school on how to check in. So I'm hoping that you will you'll share some techniques here in the second part of the show around people, because this gets in the way of all kinds of decisions of, like I want to lose weight or I want to be healthier. And yet all the behaviors are the antithesis of doing that thing. And it's like, well, clearly you have some other story that you're operating on that you're not conscious of, because you're making these choices that are not in alignment, or not in integrity, and they're not coherent. And so in this unified field, and that's why I thought this topic is very well timed, of in this state of being, how does one get into a state of being? Let's go there, maybe.
Yeah. I love this. I would also say you shared in your example of the college with your mom, and you said, I made the best of it.
Yes.
Right. Even though at the point it was ingrained from, whatever point in your life, and it wasn't an option. It was what you did. Right. Yeah. And yet the powerful thing in your share is that you still made a choice. Your free will in it is, I made the best of it. It is your resonance with it, your choice to, you know what, I'm doing this. And if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it.
Yeah. And, just as an aside for the listeners out there, and I've been sharing this recently, and I don't know why it's coming up, but So I think because I have some young children that are starting to choose colleges in my family, I chose my undergraduate school by how many Grateful Dead shows I could see. So there you go. But it is that actually is in resonance with me of following my heart. And so that is, I've been making those choices incoherent. So it is true. It was my resonance. I did make a choice in the matter. So it wasn't just like, well, I'm just subjugating myself to this. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I myself have 3 young children. They're not at the college age. They are 10, 8, and 4.
Uh-huh.
And we talk about this, which is the free will, right? And in my experience, even with parenting, right, children are no less of a being than you or I, even if their age of physicalness on this planet, maybe a little bit less in years, excuse me. So I would say at first, from a practical standpoint, it is about the language.
Yeah.
Right? Language is whole, right? And words and how we choose to express them is one element of language. And I want to be really succinct when I say this. It is also what is shared internally and then also expressed outwardly. And so one of the practices that even I have with my children at their ages is gratitude. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems so simple. And people say, if it's that simple, then why doesn't everyone do it? Right.
Yeah.
Because could it be an answer if it is that simple? Right. Because we're also taught that, you got to work really hard. You got to work long, like, 150%, which is so funny. Right. So at the same time is it like, what are you truly grateful for? Right. When you can elevate that emotion and be in that state of elevated emotions, right? Then that is your true state. And when you're operating from that, right, then your decisions, your choices, what you choose to move with and how you move with it stems from there. So it's a simple technique, right? Like what are you grateful for? And it could be, I'm grateful for air. I am grateful for my phone that keeps notes. It could be my writing utensil. There are no rules. In the game of union, as we were talking about before we went live, there's no right or wrong. There's no high or low. There's no shoulding. There's no need to do's, right? That's outward. It's what you feel. So when you can really quickly share what you're grateful for, and maybe it's who, that is a really nice way to come within.
Yeah, that's awesome. I have it in my workplace. We have a gratitude board. So every morning you come in and you put in what you're grateful for, and it is getting into that resonance of the state of being of grateful, and then operating. You make just such better choices in that state rather than I'm rushed. I had a kerfuffle with my spouse, or traffic was hellish. Whatever the things were. Rather than like, oh, clean air and water. And for my team, my A team that shows up every day and loves on our patients. And, so to bring that forth in gratitude, I think that's a really great, it's a great one. And, when people get in on that, I don't know if you've found this, but sometimes they have a hard time coming up with what they're grateful for. And once you get into the practice of it, it just starts to roll of like, oh no, actually, the more that you're grateful, you get more things that you're grateful for. And it just kind of elevates that way. This day and age with, depression, anxiety on the rise, that simple component, that could be very hard for people to implement, but it's only hard if they make it that way, right? So we can choose. That's the component of what I always share with folks is you always have this choice of if you want to make it hard, to make it hard. If you want to make it easy, well, then make it easy. In that only took me 45 years to figure that out on the planet. Because I did it really, I'm really proved I can do it the hard way. I can will will it through and push and grind and overwork and, all of those things. But that's not fun. We're choosing fun and effervescent energy and more love. Like these things, you actually have the choice of how you're going to be. So that's your point.
That is exactly my point. And when I have clients that are like, this is woohooey, right? Like gratitude, like this is not life. This is not practical, right? And I would say, well, answer me this, right? And this is going to be a yes or no. Do you like how you feel? No.
Yes.
Right? Do you?
Right. They're coming to you. Yes. They don't like. They're in a state of no. Right.
Yeah. They're like, no, I don't. Do you want to change that? Yes. Okay. What are you willing to do to change that? Right? Are you moving with, I want so much to feel better. I want so much to feel differing. I want so much to feel myself. Right? Then try it. Right? Try it, because what we are moving with is against, right? It's so much easier to say what we don't like, right? I remember, and I joke and say I'm a retired corporate. I mean, I am, right? A retired 18-year corporate softline apparel leader. At the same time, it's against, right? And when we would do performance reviews or self-evaluations in that world, it was amazing to me how you would sit and everyone could give themselves such opportunity feedback. But when you say, okay, let's put that aside, like, what are you brilliant at? What do you love? Right? Like, what gets you going? Right? And it takes a while to answer that. So then you have to stop and pause and say, why do I want to talk about what I'm not great at all of the time? Right? And that is moving with the against. Right? And it is easier in the society today to resonate with that because it's everywhere. Right? That's what it is. Right? At the same time, when you can say, all right, I'm just going to be a little cheeky and humor, right? What I am grateful for, it actually adds perspective, right? I'm grateful for the food I have, for the clothes I wear, for, oh my gosh, I'm grateful for my experience, right? When 10 seconds ago, you were like, this is woohooey.
Yeah.
Right? So there's such brilliance in that. And there's this choice in it. And I actually brought with me like my own journal, right? In which I sit with every morning for 3 to 5 minutes and I physically write, I spell it into existence what I am grateful for.
Yeah. Put pen to paper. I love that, making it a reality in physical form. So you're quite the magician then.
One might say yes.
Yeah. You create onto the paper, right? I mean, I love that about the speaking of abracadabra is that incantation is with words creating reality. And so you are truly a magician. So by taking that pen to the paper, it is in the highest sense. I mean, I say that with honor and respect. So it is, so many people don't realize that, or we're not really taught like, hey, these words matter. Like I like to say, this is a dangerous neighborhood to go into by yourself for many people, right? We're very hypercritical of ourselves and this othering and against, right? We're just kind of, it feels like a safety maneuver, right? But in essence, what it does is it locks us up in a cage. It's a gilded cage. It's a beautiful cage. Like I see, it's, plated with gold, but we're stuck in a cage. And the component I want to circle back to is you said you have to remember that you are free. And so will you expand on that a little bit more?
I absolutely will. And what I truly mean by that is free will, right? Like we are free. And what I have found in the work that I do, the conversations that I hold, the circles, if you will, in which I gather in, that there's a lot of have-tos, right? And there's a lot of, I have to stay in this job. Oh, I have to stay in this marriage. I have to do this. And well, no, you don't. Well, why do you think you do?
Yeah.
Right? Tell me about that. Like, tell me about the conversation you're going to have about that. Because when you're free, right, you do anything. Right? You could do anything. You could be anything. You could there is no limiting. And that's what I would say is that, in that cage, right, it's limiting. They're limiting beliefs. There's that imposter syndrome, right? Everyone probably knows, right? But it is limiting the true human capacity of being, right? Because we're just afraid. Maybe we're afraid to run out of money. Maybe we're afraid that no one loves us. Maybe we're afraid that we won't find another spouse, another best friend, another me, right? And when we are operating with that, then we're limiting ourselves and closing in on that cage and like closing the door ourselves actually and locking it from the inside. Right. And therefore, when we say that we're free and we have somehow forgot about that, right? Like, what's that cage? What are those thoughts? Like, what are the I can't do's? And everyone's story and narrative is differing. We just have to pause and ask the questions, so tell me more about that. Like, what if you just unlock it, right? Don't open the door yet. Just unlock that cage. Right? Like, what does that do? And you can stay in there. That's also choice, right? You stay in there and have a great life. You actually can. I spent 18 years in corporate America. I had a great life. Yeah. Great. I just couldn't shake that there was more.
Yeah. So go with that. So you also wrote about the separation of work and play is outdated. So, or like you always hear that, the work-life balance. So, you're coming out of corporate America, 18 years in high-ranking position. Why is this on the docket today?
It is because it's separation, right? And when we are moving out of an era of separation with the wisdom to choose differing, right? And yet there's these systems like corporate America, for example, right? That literally advertise, come work for us for the work-life balance. Like that is separation, right? And I'll say it like this. So I'm a mom, I'm a wife, and I'm an individual, right? And I, leader. And I physically can tell you stories about like needing to take off different hats, right? Like, oh, when I get to work, I'm going to take off my mom hat, right? And then, oh, when I get home, I'm going to put back on my mom hat and wife hat and Tina hat, right? And then all of a sudden, like now I'm somebody differing at work than I am at home. And that's trying, right? Because we just want to be innately as humans, we want to be loved and loved and engaged and involved and valued and add value. And there's this community piece. And yet it's so differing and so kind of hard, right? To get into that community when I'm not me, when I'm not my authentic self, right? When I can wear all my hats actually, because I am a mom and I am a wife and I am Tina. And I care for myself and not take care of others because that's outward. But when I care for me and my being, I have capacity to care for many others.
Got it. So that's a good distinction there. So I want you to elaborate more on that. So that focus out versus focus in. And you're saying the focus has got to be in so that your cup is full and runneth over. That's how you take care of the others in your life, right? And this is a conversation I get into a lot of mothers who kind of put their health last because they are taking care of everybody. And, when I ask them like, well, what happens if you go down? Like the ship, there's no captain on the ship anymore. Like, how is that fair to anybody in your life? And it kind of gives them pause and you're like, well, you're right. Like I gotta up my game here on me. Cause it feels like, we kind of get educated like, oh, that's selfish. Like, I don't want to be selfish. I want to be selfless as giving. And so what is that? Where does that come from? Or what is happening with that discussion?
Yeah, I believe it to be, and I can share personally, right? That is my oldest is 10, right? So that is for the moms that are out there, that is real, right? Yeah. It's so real because what we take in, right? From society, from, even look at our, own parents or those that raised us or mentors or whatnot, right? Like we see and we take in information, and therefore we do, right? So think about what we watch, what we listen to, all of that. So there's all these outward expectations, right, around what that, and we do a lot of labeling, right? What that label is expected to look like, is expected to do, is expected to be, right? And very rarely is there this conversation around transition to motherhood, right? As an example, right? Like I remember when I had my oldest, I said to my husband, I'm only going to take 6 weeks, right? I don't need a full 8 or 9 or 12. Like that's not me, right? And truthfully, right, I got to 5.5 weeks, and I was like, I'm not ready. I don't think I want to be a working mom, right?
Right.
Like this, like this is it, right? This right here felt so real, and that's just my experience. It might not be everyone's, right? It's internally, my story. And I remember saying to him, I think I'm going to stay home. And he gave some sound advice at the time I thought was really solid. And he said, you've never been a working mom, so why don't you take your other 6 weeks because, you can, right? And then see where you're at, and then go back to work and give it a month, right? And decide for yourself what it is. Right. And I was like, oh, I get to do that. I get to do that. I could do that. And he was like, yeah, Tina, you can. And I distinctly remember at the time wanting to be at the time this this cookie cutter mom, right? That was everything and anything to my child. And right, I definitely lost myself along the way, because I wanted to be that, and I wanted to be this corporate, leader, and I wanted to be this, really fun friend, and this really like sexy and fun wife. And somewhere in the midst of all that, I didn't know who I was any longer, because I didn't sit with myself and really be able to articulate what that meant for me. It's just what I saw. And then what happened, Doc, is that I started to have these reactions. And by then I was like on my 3rd kid, right? Well, maybe 2.5. And then I started to have, more and layer more in and on. And then I started to react. And then one day I was like, why am I yelling? Why am I so mad that there is dirt on my floor? Why am I so angry about the dishes in the sink, or the traffic on the road, or, my friend that's called for the 3rd time in the same week, right? Like, why am I so mad about that? And it's because the more and more that I personally layered onto myself, I lost and became shrouded more and more of myself. Until one day I didn't recognize him.
And did that turn out, like, how did you notice that you didn't recognize yourself? Was that like a health crisis, or with the reactions to the kids, or the, kind of getting aggro, or what was it?
I would say there was a few things that were working at the same time. Number one, yes, I did have a health thing. Everything I ate, I suddenly felt sick, right? Everything. And couldn't figure it out, right? And I had everything I ever said I wanted in my life. Everything, actually. And I looked at my life that is and was at the time very privileged, and yet I wasn't happy. And yet it was everything I said I ever wanted and worked so damn hard for. And so if it was everything I ever said I wanted and worked hard, why didn't it feel great? It's because it's someone else's, right?
Yeah. It wasn't your list. Right. So what do you recommend for folks that maybe this is resonating on some levels? How do they get in touch with themselves and to be in that spot of self-reflection, tuning in? Because it's sometimes we've cluttered a lot of things on top, like you said, like kept piling on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would offer two things. Number one, is, as I would say, like, get a coach,
Yeah.
right? Literally. And this isn't, the term life coach is not that, that we or anyone that has that title, is great at life, right? What that truly is it's a held space. And in that space, it's a collaboration, right? It is and offers a safety, right? Where the exchange is heard. So, where I had the skill at the time, I'm not quite sure why, right? It just kind of slapped me one day around like, this is not what it is, right? To hear myself, right? When you're in that space with a coach, that is not a family member, right? That doesn't have like I want to say vested interest, but that's not the right term, right? Like there is a vested interest in that space, but an emotional component is really what I'm saying, I suppose. That's gonna like fix it, right? Like everyone has that inner like I'm gonna fix it mode, right? Like if one of my friends calls and like, Tina, I want to talk to you, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna fix it, right? And I'm a master certified life coach, right? So that's number one. But number two is that there's this space that's so truing and honoring where the individual can begin to hear themselves, right? And then, wow, like what is that, right? And can individuals do that on their own? Certainly they can, right? We all have the innate ability to do that, right? So I think that if a life coach is not for you, right? And that's okay if it isn't, right? Truly, right? It's not about seeking outward in a life coach to get the answers, right? It is about in a space, and maybe that is an individual and a piece of paper. Right. And there's, as the gratitude offering, and then as the, I'm having a reaction right now and I'm going to write about it. And I'm just going to like put it on paper. Right. Because then what that practice, that skill does is it gives the individual the pause point to read it. And I would recommend read it out loud. Because there is something differing about in that moment, and I'm having a reaction and it's an emotionally charged one. And I'm gonna write it out, right? Whatever it is, free flow. There's no judgment, right? Don't make it perfect. It's about like literally throwing up on the paper, right? Like do it. And then once it's out, read it out loud. You will hear yourself, guaranteed.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with any stimulus, so that component for that technique is you're feeling a little bit off or some emotion is up for you. So just journal about it.
Journal about it. About it. That's what I mean by like belly up. You said bar, by the way. I said like nudge in, but I'll go with bar. Belly up to the bar of you, right? And maybe that is a piece of paper, right? And if you're like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, right?
Right.
Ask the question. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And note the differing in tone as I did that. What am I supposed to do? I don't know why I'm so pissed off. Right? Why am I crying? And then ask them questions. Why am I crying?
Yeah.
Right? May I layer into this? Because now you got me going.
Please.
So there's this, speaking of, systems and whatnot, and I'm going to speak from my own experience, not projecting. There's certain like terms, like lingo, like slangs that I remember growing up. For example, it came to me when I said, why am I crying? Right? My parents, who are great individuals, I'm going to give this preface, who are great individuals, SJ and Steve, amazing human beings. At the same time, I distinctly remember I would have this like reaction to cry. And I remember my parents saying, stop crying, I'm going to give you something to cry about.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So then, when I had, or when I'm with clients and they get emotional, like, I'm so sorry I'm crying. Why are you sorry you're crying?
Yeah.
Why? This let it out. Right. And then you start to recall like for me, that statement, like, stop crying, I'm going to give you something to cry about. Well, I don't even know what that means.
Yeah.
Right. And yet there's this, and I can go into why they said that, right? Because that's just their own reaction to it, right? At the same time, are some of those sayings from those systems, familial or whatnot, that are really operating in the system that we are unconscious about, right? So now I'm not allowed to cry. I'm not allowed to feel.
Right.
I think we are, as that society, taught to not feel.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
now here we are bellying up to the bar and we're like, let's get feely.
Yeah.
And that's scary. That's raw. That's exposure.
Yeah, that's
right?
super, super vulnerable. And it does seem like that is the super courageous as well, right? And that authenticity is kind of why I think we have so much anxiety and depression and mental illness and illness in general, is that this emotional state of being, we're not in touch with it. And so it's the body's attempts to say, hey, pay attention to me, pay attention to me. We're out of balance, but we stuff it, we suppress it, we avoid it, we close our eyes and push away from it. And that I do know that is the root of so many chronic disease states in what we see in a day-to-day, every day. And so this component of we are in the game of union. So I read that one way, and I'm curious on how you put that out there, because I really am seeing we're moving into this unified field understanding of what is happening. Like, we're pretending to be separate right now. I am another you, you are another me. We have all of these 10,000 things out here, but ultimately they all do compress down into a very small space if we were actually going to compress this matter down. And so when you say we are in the game of union, what do you mean by that?
Well, first of all, I chose the word game very specifically,
Okay.
right? Because of the sense that I intend it to be playful, right? We everything's an experiment, right? And as it shares, when it's playful, it's light, it's airy, right? When it's playful, you're more likely to experiment with it, right? It's not about finding the answer.
Yeah.
Right? It's not about finding the one thing that's going to solve it, right? The game is about the joy in the moment, right? The experiencing of, right? And so and it's a response to, it's a perspective, right? It's a interesting energy to bring into it, right? And I'm not downplaying this. Like, please, it's not as though I think what is happening right now is easy, right? It's not that. At the same time, the reaction to it is an individual's choice. So when I say we're in the game of union, and I do personally, wholly, in my every ounce of my DNA and in the collective, I would offer that we are going through this together, right? And there is a choice in a collective that we journey forward into union. And part of that is, right, that we are experiencing right now is necessary. It's choice. It's what is. Does that answer your question, by the way?
Yeah, somewhat. It is this game. I like the idea of the game of union, and that kind of adventure and play spirit in it. Rather than, I mean, you could have said, well, it's the drudgery of union, or the grind of union, whatever the thing, but it's a game, and we can create that for ourselves, of that. One of the quotes that comes to mind, and one of my mentors recently shared, is just said, the unknown is your friend. And I have a lot of, I don't know for sure, but I'm going to, XYZ, I'm asking for clarity in this area of my life, or in this planning project. And because we want to know, like, there's this innate thing of humans of like, I got to know what it is, or it's like the fear of the unknown. It's like, no, what if we embrace the unknown? Like, it is a great adventure. Like, we don't know what lies around the corner, and it could be something huge and beneficial for us, because it's set up that way for us to have that, right? Rather than dreading, like, I just heard some stats on, a UK firm did a research study on how hopeful for the future are you? And it was like this was in David Sinclair's Lifespan book. And it was like 6% of North Americans. And the highest percentage of people on the planet that were hopeful out of China, India, Brazil, these countries that don't have a lot. And Sinclair basically was saying, this it's a stature of, it's almost as if it's a plague of affluence, of, it's an entitled state to be in, to not be hopeful for the future when you have everything. Like you said, you arrived at the top of the mountain, exactly everything that was said, like, you have all of these things and you're winning the game, and you felt, I wasn't winning the game here. So it was like that aspect of, we get to choose how we play the game. And so that, I just wanted to really kind of blow that up a little bit for my listeners and viewers on What the Health, because it is so important, like on a day-to-day basis, on this union component of, I see, and why I was so excited about this topic and still am, the state of being of, it's an, hell is an inside job, as is heaven. Like, you get to choose what your reality, what you're doing in it. Like, are you being a contribution, or are you just using and sucking the resources from the thing? Like, where do you want to be on that continuum? I know where I want to be on that, but it is, it's an inside job. Like, we're responsible for our emotional state. We're responsible for our health, our mental health, our community. It all begins in there. So if we're all pointing the finger out, look at those people and what are they doing? It's like, then you are definitely not winning this game.
No, and we're not being responsible.
Yes.
Right? And we are responsible for ourselves. And that includes our reactions, our finger pointing, all of that. And it's, may I say this, like, it's okay if we do. It's okay, right? When you see the finger go and you should do this, oh my gosh, let me get curious about why I just finger pointed, or why am I even saying that, right? And I'm going to later into something you just said, so cut me off if you need me to. What I heard you say in your example and how you blew it up for your audience is that the unknown is the present moment. We are taught actually to say, oh, we're here, this is the end goal. And now so we're taught to bypass the present moment. Right? We are taught, like, here, go back to college example, right? We are here, we're going to take the ACT, SATs, right? And we're going to get into 3 schools, right? We have our reach, we have our, like, sure win, like, we're getting in, and then maybe 2 or 3 that are in it, right? And at the same time, that's the end goal. That's where it is. And then when we start at the end, right, or project the end, we're missing the whole now moment of where creation really happens. That what we do is we actually map out our steps then for the end, but with the end in mind. So the unknown, when you were saying unknown, what came up for me was this curiosity, right? And if I'm truly curious, I'm not thinking about the end game. I'm not thinking about that, right? I'm experiencing. I am a self-experiencing existence.
Yeah.
Right? And that is the unknown. That is the where I'm at and right now.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And curiosity is how we journey through it by asking questions, by having dialogue. Now, I also heard you say, like, I gather, right? Mm-hmm. Now, I might ask, if I'm, speaking about my business, I might ask, experts or those that have experience in a particular field or knowledge or whatnot. I'm gathering, right? I'm gathering information. I'm gathering stats. I'm pulsing my audience. I'm, finding out what the true need is out there. And that's great, right? And the piece that's so important is that we still check in with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a match for me? Like, all these people say this, but what does it say for me? And when we check in with ourselves, then we know.
Right. Yeah. For what is right for us, right? Not what's the norm or what's expected or the you should, your life should look like this. And that's the super exciting spot. I think we're seeing pockets of that happen now where people are really doing a reality check of like, well, what is it that I want? Like, what do you want? You want more freedom? You want more abundance? You want more love? You want better, or more relationships and on a deeper level? Like, what are those things? And start asking that of yourself, right? Because in that kind of creator mode, we do have all of those. We have access to the whole universe. Like, we are it. So by asking of yourself, like, that's where these things come from. I've always been amazed at, like, where do songs come from? So that curiosity and leaning in on these muses just make them up, and it comes from within them. And if you ask creative types, where does it come from? They have a hard time answering, which is a very fun conversation to have with people on, oh, you're a creator. Where does your art come from? Where does that, because it's this kind of unknown. So the unknown is our friend, and it is now. And so that gives a lot of excitement. And, I'll write a goal actually every day of effervescent, bubbly energy. Like, why not create this, mystical, magical experience of life rather than like, oh, I'm just, I'm not looking forward to it. Like, well, why not? Like, I love this curiosity component that you've brought into discussion here.
Yeah, why not? Yeah, why not? Right? We're here, so let's be here. Right? Let's squeeze every moment out, and we get to make it whatever we want. Yes. Right? And yes, there's fear involved in that. And yes, there is doubts, right? All of that is normal, and it's okay. Right? Yeah. It is okay. There's nothing wrong with you, me, or anyone else that is listening. Right? There is nothing wrong.
Right. Yeah, that component. That's a very Taoist statement that you've got there. There's no right way or wrong way. There's just your way, and you get to choose it. It's like you get to choose the ending of your story. You get to choose the creation of the story. You get to choose how you are during the story. So in the last little bit, Tina, what would you like to share in the last 3 minutes of the show? What do you have got for the viewers and listeners?
Wow. I have a wish and an ask.
Perfect.
If I may. Right? Yeah. My wish is that each and every one of us, right, begin our points of curiosity. Right? And that is not that we haven't been, right? We always have been, if we're real, right? We always have been. It's this wish of truing. Come hear yourself. Feel yourself. You are safe, right? You are everything that you ever needed to be, wanted to be, and will be. And let nothing else come in the way of that, right? Including yourself, right? And my ask is this: get curious. Right? Get curious. Belly up to the bar. Like, nuzzle up with that, like, fear. Nuzzle up with that doubt, with that anxiety. Because none of us are alone, by the way, right? We all have it. We all have those moments. And they're there. So sit with it, right? Get curious with it. In the tools that we've talked about, ask questions, reach out, right? And we all are here as active members of the human collective and journeying together.
Yeah. Awesome. Tina Nagel, it has been a pleasure. I've got all of your contact information in the show notes. I want everybody to check out what you're putting out there into the world. Thank you for this lively discussion and really wisdom shares that you've given to our viewers and listeners. And folks, if you got something out of this show today, please think of 2 people in your lives and share this show with them, and then get into a curiosity discussion with them. Like, recruit them in on your team and get into, like, hey, did you see Dr. Greg and Tina in this discussion that they had around curiosity and a state of being? And this might be the solution that we've been looking for. So get out there, share it. And also, if you like the show, give us a 5-star review. It does go very far. And that's how people listen and tune in, because the change starts here with each of us and sharing. So thank you all for tuning in to What the Health. We are here Tuesdays from 2 to 3 p.m. Pacific time on the Contact Talk Radio. We will see you next week. Thank you.